Canada has long seen Iran as the principal source of instability and terror in the Middle East. The regime and its proxies have murdered hundreds, including Canadian civilians, and caused untold suffering for millions of people in the Middle East and beyond, which is why we support efforts to prevent Iran from obtaining a nuclear weapon and to prevent its regime from further threatening international peace and security.
What was President Trump's reaction to you supporting the airstrikes on Iran?
I haven't spoken to the president.
What does that say about your relationship?
The president's. I don't think it says anything, to be honest. We took a position, not asking for something. We took a position because we view the nuclear threat and the export of terrorism of Iran over decades as one of the gravest threats to international peace and security. And the Americans and the Israelis haven't taken this action in that limited sense. We supported that aspect. That is not a blank check. That is not us participating. That is not us asking for something in exchange for that. None of that is true. That is just a straight up position. Thank you.
A reporter in Sydney tried to make Mark Carney flinch, tried to reduce Canada's foreign policy to a single question about Donald Trump. It didn't work. During a press conference in Australia on Tuesday, Carney was asked what President Trump's reaction was to Canada supporting the airstrikes on Iran. The implication was unmistakable. Does Canada need Washington's approval before it speaks? Carney's response was immediate, calm, and devastating. He said he hadn't spoken to the president and then made it clear that he didn't think it says anything about the relationship. No hesitation, no deflection, no nervousness, just a leader who knows exactly where he stands. And then he went further. He laid out Canada's position on the Iran conflict with surgical precision.
Despite decades of UN Security Council resolutions, the tireless work of the International Atomic Energy Agency, and the succession of sanctions and diplomatic frameworks, Iran's nuclear threat remains. And now, the United States and Israel have acted without engaging the United Nations or consulting allies, including Canada. Canada reaffirms that international law binds all belligerents. We condemn the strikes carried out by Iran on civilians and civilian infrastructure across the Middle East. And we implore all parties, including the United States and Israel, to respect the rules of international engagement.
Canada views the Iranian nuclear program and decades of state-sponsored terrorism as among the gravest threats to global peace and security. In that limited sense, Canada supported the U.S. and Israeli military action. But this was not a blank check. Canada is not participating. Canada was not consulted. Canada is not asking for anything in return. That is not a transaction, he said. That is a position. And with that single answer, the reporter's framing collapsed entirely. But Carney didn't stop there. He went even further than his original Saturday statement, updating Canada's stance in real time from the other side of the world. He said Canada took this position with regret, because the current conflict represents another failure of the international order. He acknowledged that the American and Israeli strikes appear to be inconsistent with international law. He pointed out that the United States and Israel acted without engaging the United Nations or consulting with allies, including Canada. He called for rapid de-escalation of hostilities and urged the protection of civilians across the region. This was not a man bowing to Washington. This was a prime minister carving out an independent lane on the world stage, supporting the objective of ending Iran's nuclear threat while refusing to endorse the method used to achieve it. And this press conference happened in the middle of one of the most consequential diplomatic tours in recent Canadian history. Just 48 hours earlier, Carney was in New Delhi signing deals with Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi. The two leaders announced 10 commercial agreements worth a combined $5.5 billion. The centerpiece was a landmark $2.6 billion uranium supply deal between Saskatoon-based Cameco and the Indian government, covering 22 million pounds of reactor fuel from 2027 through 2035. On top of that, HCL Technologies committed to expanding AI centers in Calgary, Mississauga, and Vancouver, increasing employment from 3,000 to over 5,000 jobs. Indian pharmaceutical firm Jubilant Pharmanova pledged $155 million to triple production at a plant in Quebec. BC-based Elk Valley Resources locked in a major coal export deal worth hundreds of millions of dollars. And the two countries set a deadline to finalize a comprehensive free trade agreement by the end of 2026, with a target to grow bilateral trade from roughly $9 billion to $50 billion by 2030. Modi himself publicly credited Carney for the momentum, calling him a friend and praising the growing cooperation across every area. From Delhi, Carney flew straight to Sydney. He arrived Tuesday and immediately pivoted to deepening ties with Australia, another Five Eyes partner. The agenda included investment, defense, security, critical minerals, and artificial intelligence. And then came the signal that separates routine visits from historic ones. Carney was invited to address the Australian Parliament in Canberra on Thursday. Countries do not extend that invitation lightly. That is reserved for leaders who represent strategic value, not symbolic gestures. Meanwhile, the Middle East was spiraling. Iran retaliated against the strikes by hitting U.S. embassies in Riyadh and Kuwait with drones. The U.S. State Department ordered evacuations of non-emergency personnel across 6 countries. Across Tehran, explosions continued through the night. Trump suggested the campaign could last more than a month. Iranian Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei was killed in the initial strikes, and Iran has shown no signs of backing down. The conflict is widening with no exit plan in sight. And in the middle of all of this, a reporter in Sydney thought the right question to ask was what Donald Trump thinks about Mark Carney. Carney didn't take the bait. He didn't need to. Because while Washington escalates, Ottawa is diversifying. While Trump threatens tariffs, Carney signs billions in contracts across 2 continents. While others seek approval, Carney builds leverage. The contrast is not subtle anymore. Canada is not reacting to geopolitics, it is repositioning itself inside it.